Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. It's an educational channel reviewing many great theories of everything, ancient and modern, mostly from obscure sources. And the hope is that the exposure of these theories of everything will help the audience like it has helped me, or more, and or like it will help me if I pay attention, and especially in terms of paradigm shifting, our quest for better mental, spiritual, and physical health, our awakening to 5D consciousness, our formation of a holistic worldview. Today is our 68th video that we've done on the book called Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha by Daniel Ingram. And Ingram has been a Buddhist follower. I wouldn't say a Buddhist, but at least a follower of all things Buddhism for probably 30 years. Gone on many, many, many long meditation retreats over in the Far East, and has brought back the secret information, the skinny on many finer points of Buddhism, and especially Buddhist meditation, that he wants to share with us. I think he went down a lot of dead-end streets and had the rug pulled out from under him several times, and he's hoping that his book will help us avoid that. He cautions throughout the book not to get caught up in any of this dogma. The main crux of this book, and what he would say would be the core teachings of the Buddha in general, is that you can awaken yourself through insight meditation, opening to your five senses and your mental sensations, and investigating them for the three characteristics of impermanence, dissatisfactoriness, and no self. All of our sensations have those characteristics, and as we learn that better and become faster and we become faster and faster in picking those things out, and we cycle through stages of insight, and with every cycle we wake ourselves up by degrees. And we're in about chapter 38 of this book, and he's telling a story about four of his friends who were all friends and hard, mighty meditators, and they had come under the influence of this one person who claimed to have a technique that was able to gradually eliminate emotional influences in your life, and that was kind of your path to awakening, to enlightenment. And Ingram at first was open to the idea, but he began to notice that some of them were actually still having emotional reactions. Okay, so I think this last paragraph is going to end the story, and maybe we'll get onto the lessons of the story. So, time passed, however, and one by one, the four people renounced their claims to have eliminated all emotions, with each stating something along the lines of having realized that their model had caused them to be in denial of what they were actually feeling to some degree. All four later arrived at the conclusion that the people who had inspired them were also clearly not free of emotions. One of the four ended up with some long-lasting psychological complexities, though the remaining three did better, and two of them did say that they did change something useful in the way that emotions were experienced, though the elimination of emotions was not that something. So ended an interesting saga, but the end result, at least from my point of view, has led to four conclusions. One, beware of the limited emotional range models. This is a chapter of basically a survey of different of the models of awakening that have come down the pike over the last 2,500 years of, this is how you know you're awakened. This is how you know that you have reached the goal or whatever. And one of those the limited emotional range models is that, one sign of your enlightenment is that you don't have, in some cases, don't have the negative emotions, and in some cases, you don't have emotions at all. So that's what he's saying. Beware of the limited emotional range models. 2, investigating the sensuous beauty of reality, emphasizing rapture and tuning into the freshness of the sensate world, the body and its feelings can be a fun and rewarding practice. 3, be careful with claims of having done something final before really giving reality time to show you what subtleties and complexities remain. 4, strong, dedicated, intelligent practitioners can be led astray and confused by golden promises of the spiritual marketplace, just like anyone else. So keep reality testing your practices to see how they hold up. I know of a few other people, some of whom I have met, others by reports of good friends who have met them, who still claim to have eliminated all emotions as well as nearly all thought, though those who have spent time with them all say that they still appear to have emotions and can be moody, snippy, arrogant, and the like, just as anyone else can. Can I be certain I know exactly what is going on with them regarding their internal experience? Obviously not. Am I very skeptical? Yes, I am. However, in the interest of fairness, I present these examples just so that you can do your own research and realize that there is still controversy about this. Best of luck sorting it out for yourself. Regardless, the ability to modulate responses to emotions skillfully can sometimes give the impression that these emotions have been attenuated or eliminated, but that ability and emotional elimination are not the same thing. Okay, this section is called the action models. The action models tend to involve certain actions that awakened beings cannot commit or must commit. Both types of models are completely ridiculous, and so we come now to the first of the models that simply have no basis in reality. The traditional Theravada models contain numerous statements that are simply wrong about what an awakened being cannot do or will do. My favorite examples of this include statements that arahants cannot break the precepts, including killing, lying, stealing, having sex, doing drugs, or drinking, cannot become sexually aroused, cannot have jobs, cannot be married, and cannot say they are arahants. They also state that unordained arahants must join the Theravada monastic order within days of their realization or they will die. Needless to say, all are simply absurd lies, lies that have unfortunately often been perpetrated or perpetuated by arahants. There is also another subtler and more seductive view, which is that awakened beings somehow will behave in a way that is better or higher, though they won't define what those actions might be or what actions they might avoid. I consider this view exceedingly dangerous. While I wish to promote the shift in perception that I call awakening and other names, I don't want to imply that somehow this will save anyone from stupid actions or make them always aware of how to do the right thing or avoid screwing up. Such views are a setup for massive delusion and huge shadow sides, as anyone who has spent enough time in any spiritual community knows all too well. As a Zen expression says, the bigger the front, the bigger the back. And this particular view can give you a shadow side the size of Texas. The list is remarkably long of awakened individuals who have bitten the proverbial dust by putting themselves up on a pedestal, hypocritically violating their own lofty ideals of behavior, and then having been exposed as actually being human. The list of spiritual aspirants who have failed to draw the proper conclusions from the errors of the awakened is even longer. That so many intelligent individuals have such a hard time sorting all this out instead of putting a spin on, rationalizing, enabling, justifying, protecting, and defending the often dangerous behavior of countless teachers and spiritual leaders is truly mind-boggling until you consider its parallels in the leadership that countries with the capacity to end most life on the planet choose for themselves. And suddenly it is less surprising. There are many schools of thought on this issue, and I will give them formal names here, though in reality they don't think of themselves this way. The partway up the mountain school essentially believes those who screwed up and caused a scandal were only halfway up the mountain, only partially awakened, as anyone who is really awakened couldn't possibly have done those terrible things. While clearly some were only partially enlightened, or perhaps not enlightened at all in the technical sense, a number who screwed up clearly knew and know ultimate reality inside and out. And so this model misses many important points. The crazy wisdom school believes that enlightened beings transcend conventional reality and with it conventional morality and causality. So they are the natural manifestation of a wisdom that seems crazy to us foolish mortals, but is really a higher teaching in disguise. While not entirely absurd, as there are many cultural aspects and societal norms that can seem a bit childish, artificial, unnecessary, unhelpful, or naive in the face of realization, the crazy wisdom school provides too easy an excuse for plenty of behavior that has been and is just plain wrong. Irresponsible, stupid, exploitative, reckless, hurtful, delusional, narcissistic, inconsiderate, juvenile, depraved, vile, and needlessly destructive. Then there is my school, for which I have yet to come up with a catchy name, but perhaps we could call it the reality school. And it promotes the view that awakened beings are human, and unfortunately humans, enlightened or otherwise, whose brains contain a thin veneer of civilization retrofitted over a much larger, more ancient, more primal lizard brain, all screw up at times. There is nothing special or profound about this. In short, this school categorically rejects the specific lists and dogmas of the traditional action models in all forms, from the preposterous lists of the Theravada to the subtle sense that enlightened beings somehow are guaranteed to act in enlightened ways perpetually, whatever those are. It also rejects the rationalizations of the crazy wisdom schools. That said, the ability to see things as they are does allow for the possibility of more measured and intelligent responses to situations and emotions, as stated earlier. That is a very different concept from coming up with a list of actions that enlightened beings never would or could do. And it certainly doesn't mean that they will necessarily act the way we think they will, or that theirs will always be the right or best action from our perspective. Further, While this is not an exhaustive list, the behavior of any being is always affected by the following: the standard laws of the natural world, the limits of their level of realization, the ingrained habits of the realized individual, including personality quirks and psychological stuff, the residue of and or shadow sides of the technique and traditions they use to attain their understanding, the fact that mindfulness waxes and wanes, at least in arhants, those below arhantship, and in realistic definitions of Buddhas. In fact, the fact that confusion and stupidity can still occur very much as before. The limits of the relative knowledge and experiences of the realized individual, the psychological and physiological issues that apply to the brain and body of the realized individual, their cultural upbringing and the social conventions and mores created by it. You will notice that this is quite a realistic list. Thus, the dogmas of the standard action models, while containing a few grains of truth, are simply wildly inaccurate and generally represent some of the most questionable of the models of enlightenment. A closely related issue involves the tensions between the technically enlightened models and the limited possible action models. There are schools of thought that say one enlightened action and one is a Buddha, one deluded action, and one is an ordinary human being. These have their value from a certain behavioral point of view and can serve as a valuable reminder that conventional morality tends to be an extremely good idea most of the time. I, for one, think that everyone, regardless of purported realizations or lack thereof, should be held to a high and universal, non-harming ethical standard, though in some humane, just, inclusive, and forgiving way. However, teachings based on some arbitrary ideal called enlightened action can begin to diminish the importance of direct realization of the truth of things and reinforce the mythical residue of the limited possible action models of realization. There are those who are technically unenlightened, meaning that they have never completed even one progress of insight or attained to any direct understanding of emptiness or non-duality, who nonetheless live lives that would be considered unremittingly exemplary and even saintly by the very highest standards of human generosity, compassion, and conduct. I have been fortunate enough to meet and work with a few of these people and continue to stand in awe of them. Just so, there are those who are technically awakened, who nonetheless can appear exceedingly ordinary, seem to be distinctly questionable character, disposition, and moral virtue, or seem sometimes downright debauched, nasty, and insufferable. I've met a good number of these, and that I have met more of them than I have those I would consider truly saintly, leads me to the data-driven conclusion that it is easier to master insight practices than to master ethical and kind behavior. Now remember, there are three trainings in Buddhism. The first is training in morality. The second is training in concentration, which is training and meditating on an object. And the third is training in insight, which is, again, meditating on your sensations for the three characteristics, and that is the one that wakes you up and confers wisdom upon you and ends suffering for you. So he's saying that the first training is harder to master than the third. The third is pretty hard to master. I say this not to excuse anyone, but just to point out that we should all continue to strive to be moral people, and this is evidenced in our behavior with one another. While the failure of the limited or enlightened action models and limited emotional models is a huge disappointment from one point of view, it also means that there is hope for the rest of us. Our lives are it. Our emotions are it. Our habits are it. Our limitations are it. Our neuroses are it. Our issues are it. And our shadow sides are it. How can we attain understanding if we do not see clearly into reality as it is? How can we see clearly into reality as it is if we spend most of our time thinking that it isn't good enough to examine reality clearly? Okay, this is called the perfect speech models. Very closely related to the action models are those models that imagine that enlightened beings will always say exactly the right thing in a perfectly kind and appropriate way. It is not that right speech as a practice and part of the Eightfold Path isn't important. It very much is. But here I'm talking about models regarding results. It is not that insight practice can't help us to recognize our intention to speak before we speak, and thus provide an increased ability to internally edit the mental script before it translates to actual words. It is not that insight practices can't slowly transform our ways of being in the world into somewhat healthier ones, as they often do. However, the ideals that people have around right speech almost always conform to their own personal vision of exactly what proper speech and etiquette are and how everything should be said. Ideals that are part of their own individual and cultural conditionings, which vary widely. Chances are slim that any two people, even awakened ones, would agree on exactly what would be the perfect thing to say and the perfect way to say it in any given situation, and that also includes awakened beings. Styles of communication, agendas, and goals for speaking vary widely. There is little chance that you will understand exactly what someone else is trying to accomplish when they say something, and even less of a chance that anyone will always know exactly how someone will interpret what they say. I am a big fan of the moral training in right speech. Here are some key features of training in right speech: abstaining from lying, divisive speech, abusive speech, idle chatter, and speaking at the right time, speaking truth, and speaking kindly and helpfully with a mind of goodwill. That said, plenty assume that success in insight training will necessitate success in right speech and in right speech training, and this is unfortunately not the case. This section is called the perfect internet behavior models. Related to this model and a testament to the world of technology as I write this is that the world of internet forums and online interaction has exploded. And so it is now worth including the perfect internet behavior model, in which awakened beings will automatically post, email, text, tweet, etc., exactly what your specific ideals of perfection dictate that they would. As numerous online Dharma forums have clearly demonstrated, there is, unfortunately, only the loosest of correlations between levels of deep insight and the way that those with some realization interact online. Some people are kind and respectful, some abrasive and mean, some trollish, some power-hungry, some needy of attention, others needy of being liked or validated. Some put out only the safest of whitewashed politically correct platitudes. Others drive into the edgy world of online flame wars at the drop of a hat. And some blast others without any apparent regard for their feelings at all. Just as there are lots of different personality styles, just so internet personas vary in those with deep insight and in those without. I have seen all these and many more from people who have extremely strong practices, so those who imagine that awakened people will meet their high ideals in the online world are very likely to be disappointed. Further, those who judge online practitioners by the personality traits of their posts are also likely to be some degree of wrong regarding how these relate to their actual practice, insights, and abilities. Again, there is often some correlation, but you would be amazed at how easy it is to be wrong about who is on the other side of that keyboard when you can't see them and even when you can. These basic rules of the internet apply just as well to online dharma as they do to everything else. There are people with great abilities and wisdom who do a poor job of representing themselves in text form, and plenty who really are not that talented, accomplished, or wise who manage to do a great job at internet advertising. It is again disappointing, but that is the way of the internet as well as the rest of the world. Okay, this section is called the powers models. On a related topic, awakened beings are often believed to have various kinds of magical powers with a CK, typically extraordinary ones, and thus we have the powers models. The converse of this is the belief that people who have extraordinary powers might be or must be awakened. However, the relationship between the powers and fundamental insight is tenuous, though not non-existent. Psychic powers come out of shamatha or concentration practices, particularly the fourth shamatha jhana, jhana like a state of mind, though they may arise as well in the stages of the arising and passing away, high equanimity, stage 4, high equanimity, stage 11, and sometimes in other stages and states. Those are stages of insight. Some people just seem to have them regardless of their concentration or insight abilities. I have provided a more detailed discussion of the powers later, but if you are curious, you could jump to part 6 now. It is strange to talk about the powers models when I haven't even really talked about the powers yet, but this odd order of things is a cunning and calculated move to keep people reading who would long ago have gone into some internal emotional spasm due to the stuff that I cover in part 6. Note, nearly all the states and stages where the powers arise can be attained by beings who have not yet reached the first stage of awakening. And so we can see that there is no clear connection between most of the powers and awakening. The short list of powers that are the exclusive domain of the awakening are attaining to fruitions, the pure abodes, Nirodha Samapatti, and being able to talk about the Dharma from direct experience, along with a few other subtle odds and ends that perhaps I will cover some other time. It is true that along the way to awakening, it is hard to avoid chancing into all sorts of experiences that are described in the standard list of the powers. And it is also much easier to develop the shamatha jhanas when you are in the review phase of a path than it is if you are not awakened. However, developing seemingly random experiences into powers that can be attained again and again is a completely different matter and still unrelated to awakening, except on this one front. There is something about the direct perception of the interconnection of things that does lend a certain oomph to the utilization and development of powers. Further, some of the same mental skill sets that allows us to awaken also allow us to cultivate the powers more easily, should we be so inclined. Thus, we see some hint of why there are these models of awakening. However, as stated above, these are associations and nothing more. In summary, just because someone has powers doesn't at all mean that they are awakened. And just because someone is awakened doesn't mean they will have any psychic powers that are not directly related to their clear perception of things. That is really the key point. Okay, this section is called the energetic models. In nearly the same vein as the powers models are the energetic models. They tend to involve ideals that imply that Enlightened beings will have all their energy channels clear, their chakras or energy centers all the right shape and color and all spinning in the correct direction, their aura large, regular, and some nice color such as white, gold, or ultraviolet. And in general, they will have perfected their energetic system, regardless of the energetic system model being used. The simple fact of multiple models and visions of what a perfected system should look like is already a red flag for anyone paying attention. The various traditions can't even agree on how many chakras there are, much less the rest of the details of what colors mean, what the chakras look like, which channels and centers are related to what, and the like. I have noticed that these experiences are very scriptable, meaning that our concepts of what is supposed to be happening can influence what we perceive in these areas. These models also have much to be desired, and generally, as in the powers models, are referring to experiences that happen in the arising and passing and the fourth jhana. It is not that I don't think we should practice in a system that uses certain colors or numbers or chakras, as those can be great practices, but I do critique those who are sure that every awakened being will look just like the model they have in mind. I think we're going to call it right here. I can't even see the screen to see how much time has expired, but I think we're about done for today. And so we will resume at this juncture tomorrow when we resume. Thanks for tuning in today, and have a great day.